I waited 7 years for a phone call that never came. 7 birthdays marked alone. 7 Christmas mornings staring at a silent phone. 7 years of wondering how a father becomes invisible to the children he raised with his own hands. I used to tell myself there had to be a reason. That they were busy. That life moved fast. That one day the phone would ring, and everything would make sense again. It never did. If you're watching this, thank you for being here with me. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. Maybe we're strangers, but tonight, at least, I won't be alone. My story begins on a Tuesday morning in early November, in my small apartment on the east side of Cleveland. The kind of place people don't notice unless they live there. 1 bedroom. Thin walls. Radiator heat that banged all night like it was arguing with itself. I woke up before my alarm, same as always. 6:12 a.m. My body never forgot its old routine, even though the job that shaped it disappeared years ago. 39 years as a city maintenance supervisor will do that to a man. You wake up early whether you need to or not. The first thing I did, without thinking, was reach for my phone on the nightstand. I hadn't even opened my eyes yet. Just muscle memory. Hope disguised as habit. The screen lit up. No missed calls. No messages. Same as yesterday. Same as the day before that. Same as the last 7 years. I sat up slowly, feeling the familiar pull in my lower back, the quiet reminder of decades spent lifting things heavier than I should have. The room was cold. I swung my feet onto the floor and stood there for a moment, steadying myself, listening to the hum of the radiator and the distant sound of traffic starting up outside. The apartment smelled faintly of old coffee and lemon cleaner. Clean, but tired. Like me. I shuffled into the kitchen and poured water into my old kettle. The one my wife, Linda, bought the year we moved into our first house. It whistled too loud and took too long to boil, but it still worked. Linda used to say things that last have character. She'd been gone 11 years now. Cancer doesn't care how careful you are or how much love you put into a life. It just takes what it wants. I made coffee and stood by the window while it brewed, looking down at the street. People in coats walking with purpose. A man waiting at the bus stop. A woman pulling a kid along by the hand, backpack bouncing behind him. Life moving forward, whether you're part of it or not. The walls of my living room were covered in photos. All old. None newer than 8 years. My daughter, Melissa, at 12, missing 2 front teeth and smiling like she'd just won something. My son, Ryan, in his high school football uniform, helmet tucked under his arm, looking taller than I remembered. A family picture from Cedar Point. Linda in the middle, her arm around both kids, my hand on her shoulder. We looked like a family that would always stay a family. I poured coffee into my mug, black, and stood there staring at those frozen faces. People who existed now only in memory. My kids were adults. In their 30s. With careers. Homes. Children of their own. Grandchildren I'd never held. I knew their names. Emma. Lucas. Noah. I'd learned them from social media before I was quietly blocked, one platform at a time. I knew Emma liked dance. Lucas played baseball. Noah had allergies. I knew these things the way strangers know them. From a distance. Without permission. The coffee tasted bitter. I didn't add sugar. Never had. Around 8, I pulled on my jacket and went for my walk. 3 miles every morning. Down Euclid, past the closed hardware store, through the park near the old library. It kept my legs working and my mind from turning on itself. The park was busy for a weekday. Retirees. Parents with strollers. A few kids climbing the jungle gym before school. I passed an older man sitting on a bench, his granddaughter on his lap, feeding crumbs to pigeons. She laughed every time they fluttered. He looked at her like she was the only thing that mattered. I kept walking. I passed a woman about my age pushing a stroller, her daughter walking beside her, talking animatedly about something that clearly mattered a lot. 3 generations moving together, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Linda used to talk about that. Grandkids. She'd paint pictures with words when the chemo left her too tired to do much else. You'll be the fun grandpa, she used to say. You'll teach them how to fix things. How to ride bikes. You'll sneak them candy when I'm not looking. She made me promise to take care of our kids. To stay close to them. I promise, I told her. And I meant it. I tried. God knows I tried. By the time I got back to the apartment, my legs ached and my back was tight. I heated leftover soup for lunch and sorted the mail. Bills. Flyers. A grocery ad. Then I saw it. An envelope that didn't belong. Thick. Cream-colored. My name printed neatly on the front. Not handwritten. Printed. Professional. My heart did something strange. Not excitement. Not exactly fear. Something cautious. The return address stopped me cold. Scottsdale, Arizona. That's where Melissa lived. I sat down on the couch before opening it. My hands weren't shaking, but they felt distant, like they belonged to someone else. I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out the card. Heavy paper. Embossed lettering. Elegant. You are invited to celebrate the 40th birthday of Melissa Carter. Saturday, November 18th, 7 p.m. An address followed. A large home, judging by the neighborhood name alone. No note. No dad. No hope you can come. Just the invitation. After 7 years of silence, it was something. I sat there staring at it, my mind racing through memories I hadn't invited. The birthday cards I'd mailed every year, always returned unopened. The Christmas gifts left on porches, never acknowledged. The voicemail messages that grew shorter and quieter over time. Hey, it's Dad. Just checking in. Hope you're doing well. Call me if you get a chance. They never did. I remembered finding out Ryan had gotten married from a coworker who assumed I'd been there. The pity on his face when I said I hadn't known still burned. I remembered learning about Emma's birth months after the fact. Oh, we've just been busy, Melissa had said, sounding annoyed that I'd even asked. 7 years of that. 7 years of swallowing the hurt because fathers aren't supposed to complain. I looked down at the invitation again. Why now? People don't suddenly remember you after 7 years for no reason. Maybe she wanted to reconnect. Maybe becoming a mother changed her. Maybe this was the olive branch I'd been waiting for. I stopped myself. Hope had betrayed me too many times. But I also knew I couldn't ignore it. If there was even a chance, just a chance, that my daughter wanted me back in her life, I had to show up. Not with hope. With clarity. I decided I would go. The next few days passed in a strange, careful fog. I bought a suit. Nothing flashy. Dark gray. The price made me wince, but I paid anyway. I bought a gift. A simple gold bracelet. Not too expensive, but meaningful. Something a father gives a daughter. The night before the party, I barely slept. Not from excitement. From a quiet dread I couldn't name. Saturday afternoon, I shaved, dressed, and looked at myself in the mirror. A man in his early 70s stared back. Gray hair. Lines earned honestly. Tired eyes that still held something stubborn. I practiced saying happy birthday. It sounded foreign in my mouth. The flight to Arizona felt surreal. As if I was stepping into someone else's life. The car ride to the address took me past gated communities and manicured lawns. The house was enormous. Lights glowing warmly. Cars lined the driveway. Laughter spilling into the night. I walked up to the door holding the gift, my heart steady in a way that surprised me. Inside, everything smelled like money. Clean. Polished. Effortless. The backyard was filled with people. Music played softly. Tables draped in white. Glasses clinking. And then I saw her. Melissa stood near the center, laughing, beautiful, confident. She looked nothing like the little girl who used to fall asleep on my shoulder during movies. I walked toward her. She saw me when I was still several steps away. Her smile flickered. Just for a moment. Then it returned, practiced and smooth. "Dad," she said, kissing the air near my cheek. "You made it." Her voice was polite. Distant. "I wouldn't miss it," I said. She didn't ask how I'd been. Didn't ask about the trip. Her attention drifted almost immediately back to the people around her. "This is my father," she said to them. "Not Dad. Father." Like a title, not a relationship. They smiled politely. I was introduced, acknowledged, and dismissed without a word. I found a seat near the edge of the yard and watched. I saw Ryan there, too. He didn't come over. Didn't even pretend not to see me. Then someone tapped a glass. The music stopped. Melissa and her husband stepped onto a small stage. They talked about family. About legacy. About investments. Then she looked straight at me. "Dad, why don't you come up here?" Every face turned. My instincts screamed. Something was wrong. But I stood and walked forward anyway. On the stage, her arms slipped around my shoulders. The first touch in years. It felt rehearsed. Her husband spoke about a business opportunity. About expanding their real estate portfolio. Then Ryan stepped forward with papers. They knew exactly how much money I had. Exactly. "We thought it would be meaningful if you contributed," Melissa said softly. "That way you could really be part of the family again." The words hit me like ice water. 7 years of silence. One invitation. And now this. I understood everything in that moment. I looked at my children. Not the kids in the photos on my wall. These adults. Calculating. Expectant. "No," I said. The silence was absolute. I stepped down from the stage and walked out. I never went back. Within a month, I sold my apartment. Closed my accounts. Changed my phone number. 3 months later, I changed my name. I became someone they couldn't find. I moved to a small coastal town where no one knew my past and no one needed to. I built a quiet life. One filled with peace instead of waiting. Years passed. I never heard from them again. And for the first time in my life, that didn't hurt. Because sometimes, the most powerful thing you can do is stop begging to be loved. If this story resonated with you, know this: you are not invisible. And you don't have to wait forever for people who already chose to forget you. I didn't disappear in a dramatic way. There was no final speech, no confrontation after that night. I simply stopped existing in the version of the world my children occupied. The day after the party, I woke up in the hotel room before sunrise. Arizona mornings were quiet in a way Cleveland never was. I lay there staring at the ceiling, replaying the night in slow, unemotional detail. Not anger. Not sadness. Just clarity. They hadn't invited me because they missed me. They hadn't forgiven me because there was nothing to forgive. They remembered me because they wanted something. I showered, dressed, and packed my bag. The gold bracelet stayed on the nightstand. I didn't leave it as a message. I left it because it no longer belonged to them. At the airport, families moved in clusters. Parents juggling backpacks and coffee cups. Grandparents holding hands with kids who walked just a little too slow. I watched them without envy. Just observation. Like someone watching a life they used to know from the outside. Back in Cleveland, the apartment felt smaller than it ever had. Same walls. Same photos. Same silence. But something had shifted. The waiting was gone. That Monday morning, I walked into a courthouse I'd driven past 1,000 times and never thought I'd enter for myself. I took a number, sat on a plastic chair, and waited to speak with a clerk. "I want to legally change my name," I said when it was my turn. She looked up, surprised, then nodded like this wasn't the first time she'd heard something like that. Paperwork slid across the counter. Instructions given in a voice that didn't ask questions. I chose a new first name. Nothing dramatic. Just something that didn't belong to the man who spent 7 years begging for scraps of attention. I kept my last name. I wasn't erasing my past. I was setting a boundary around it. While the name change processed, I worked quietly. Methodically. I closed my checking and savings accounts and opened new ones at a different bank. I canceled my phone number and bought a prepaid phone under my new name. I deleted my email address. Then my social media. All of it. Years of unanswered messages vanished with a click. I sold the apartment for less than it was worth because I didn't want delays. I didn't want traces. I told no one. There was no one to tell. 2 months later, I loaded what little I owned into a rented SUV and drove west. No destination at first. Just distance. Mile after mile of highway where no one knew me and no one expected anything from me. I stopped when I found a place that felt quiet enough. A small coastal town where the ocean met the land without ceremony. I rented a modest apartment with a balcony that faced the water. The first night there, I slept with the window open. Waves instead of traffic. Wind instead of sirens. I woke up the next morning and realized something startling. No one was waiting for me to call. No one was expecting anything from me. And for the first time in years, my chest didn't feel tight. I fell into a rhythm. Morning walks along the shore. Coffee at the same diner where the waitress learned my order by the third visit. Fixing things around town because that's what I knew how to do. People didn't ask about my past. In places like that, everyone has one, and it's understood that you share it only if you want to. I introduced myself by my new name. And slowly, it stopped feeling borrowed. Months passed. Then a year. I didn't mark birthdays anymore. Didn't check my phone hoping for something that wouldn't come. The absence of that habit felt like healing. Once, while standing in line at the grocery store, a child tugged at my jacket and asked if I could help him reach a box on the shelf. His grandmother smiled and thanked me. It didn't hurt. Not the way it used to. It was just a moment. And then it passed. 3 years after I left, a letter arrived in my mailbox. The handwriting was unmistakable. I didn't open it right away. I let it sit on the counter while I made coffee. While I looked out at the water. While I considered what opening it might cost me. The letter was an apology. Carefully written. Thought out. It spoke of regret. Of therapy. Of understanding things too late. I believed it. That was the surprising part. I believed every word. But belief doesn't undo time. I folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, and placed it in a drawer with other things I didn't throw away but no longer lived with. I never responded. Not out of spite. Not out of anger. Out of acceptance. Some relationships don't end in explosions. They fade. And once they're gone, trying to rebuild them doesn't always bring peace. Sometimes it brings you right back to the beginning. Today, my life is quiet. Intentionally so. I wake up early. I walk. I fix things. I drink coffee on my balcony and watch the sun rise over the water. People here know my name. They greet me because they want to, not because they're obligated. I don't feel forgotten anymore. And if there's one thing I learned from all of this, it's this. Love that has to be chased isn't love. Family that only remembers you when they need you isn't family. Walking away doesn't always mean you lost. Sometimes, it means you finally chose yourself. If you're listening to this and waiting for someone to remember you, I hope you hear this clearly. You don't have to disappear to find peace. But you do have to stop begging to be seen. I used to think peace would feel louder when it finally arrived. Like relief crashing in all at once. Like something obvious and overwhelming. It didn't. Peace came quietly. In small, ordinary moments that added up before I noticed they mattered. It came the first time I realized I hadn't checked my phone all day. It came the first time I laughed without immediately feeling guilty for it. It came the first morning I woke up and my first thought wasn't about who hadn't called me. Years passed like that. I learned the tide schedule without looking it up. Learned which mornings the water was glassy and which ones came with wind that cut through your jacket. I learned which bench on the pier stayed dry after rain and which coffee shop burned their espresso if you came too late in the afternoon. I learned people's names. Real names. Not usernames. Not labels like dad or grandpa that came with expectations and conditions. There was Harold, who walked his dog at the same time I did every morning and complained about his knees like it was a competitive sport. There was June, who ran the bookstore and slipped free bookmarks into every purchase like a secret gift. There was Sam at the hardware store who trusted me to fix things he didn't want to bother with. They didn't know my history. They didn't need to. To them, I was just a man who showed up when he said he would. A man who returned borrowed tools. A man who listened more than he spoke. That was enough. Sometimes, late at night, memories still came. Not the sharp ones. The quieter ones that slipped in when you weren't guarding yourself. Teaching Melissa how to spell her name at the kitchen table. Ryan asking me to check under his bed for monsters even though he pretended not to believe in them. Linda humming while folding laundry, off-key and unapologetic. I let those memories pass through me without fighting them. They didn't own me anymore. Once a year, on my birthday, I walked down to the water alone. I didn't wait for cards. I didn't wait for calls. I brought myself a slice of cake from the bakery and ate it slowly, watching the sun drop into the ocean. It felt strange at first. Celebrating alone. Then it felt honest. I stopped measuring my worth by who remembered me. Stopped tying my value to roles that had been taken away without my consent. I wasn't the forgotten father anymore. I was just a man living a life that fit. Every so often, I wondered if my grandchildren would ever look me up someday. Teenagers curious about family history. Adults asking questions their parents avoided. Maybe they would. Maybe they wouldn't. For the first time, the answer didn't control my happiness. If they found me, they'd find a man who wasn't desperate. Who wasn't waiting with open wounds. Who wasn't willing to trade peace for proximity. If they didn't, I would still wake up the next morning, make my coffee, and walk toward the water. That's what freedom looks like when you've earned it the hard way. People talk a lot about forgiveness. About reconciliation. About how family is everything. What they don't talk about is the cost of staying where you're not wanted. What they don't tell you is that choosing yourself doesn't mean you failed. Sometimes it means you finally stopped abandoning yourself for people who already walked away. I didn't change my name to punish anyone. I changed it because the man I used to be was slowly disappearing anyway. This way, at least, the disappearance was on my terms. If you're listening to this and you feel invisible, ignored, used, or forgotten, hear me clearly. You don't need permission to walk away. You don't need validation to protect your dignity. You don't owe your peace to anyone who treats you like an afterthought. Some doors close quietly. And sometimes, the life waiting on the other side of that closed door is the one that finally feels like home. There's a moment that comes after you stop waiting for people to change. It doesn't arrive with fanfare. No announcement. No clear line that says this is where it gets easier. It sneaks up on you. It was a Wednesday afternoon when I noticed it for the first time. I was standing in line at the post office, holding a small package for June at the bookstore. She'd ordered a rare title and asked if I wouldn't mind mailing it for her since I was heading that way anyway. The clerk smiled and said, "You're always helping someone." The words landed softly, but they stayed with me all the way home. Always helping someone. For years, I'd helped the same people over and over, convinced that if I gave enough, loved enough, waited long enough, they'd finally turn back toward me. That kind of helping drained you. Left you hollow. This was different. This kind of helping didn't cost me my self-respect. I started to understand something I hadn't before. There's a difference between being needed and being valued. I'd spent most of my life confusing the two. My children needed me when they were young. Then, later, they needed my money. But valuing me? That had stopped somewhere along the way, quietly, without explanation. Here, in this small town by the water, people valued consistency. Presence. Quiet reliability. They didn't need me to prove anything. They didn't expect more than I could give. That night, I sat on my balcony longer than usual, wrapped in a sweater, listening to the waves roll in and out like steady breathing. I realized something else, something that surprised me. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Melissa. Not at Ryan. Not even at myself. Anger requires energy, and I'd finally stopped feeding the past. A few weeks later, Curtis invited me to a potluck at the community center. No pressure, he said. Just people and food. I went. I brought a casserole that didn't look like much but tasted better than it had any right to. People laughed. Someone played guitar badly. Someone else sang anyway. Plates were passed. Stories shared in pieces, never all at once. At one point, a woman I'd only met twice leaned over and said, "I'm glad you came." Just that. I didn't have to earn it. I didn't have to negotiate for it. I drove home afterward with the windows cracked open, the salt air filling the car, and realized I hadn't thought about my old life once the entire evening. That was when I knew the chapter had closed. Not because I forced it to, but because it no longer asked for my attention. Every so often, I still opened the drawer where the letter was kept. Not to reread it. Just to remind myself that understanding can come too late to change outcomes. Regret doesn't obligate reconciliation. Some people learn. Some don't. Some learn only after the damage is done. That's not cruelty. That's reality. I never became bitter. I never told my story to make my children look like villains. I tell it because silence convinces too many people that enduring neglect is noble. It isn't. Endurance has its place. But dignity matters more. There are nights when I sit alone and feel the weight of age in my bones, when the future feels shorter than the past. And even then, I don't wish I'd stayed. I wish I'd left sooner. Because the truth is this. The world is full of people who will welcome you without asking what you can give them first. Sometimes they're not the ones you expected. Sometimes they're not the ones you raised. And that's okay. Life doesn't end when the people you love choose to forget you. Sometimes, that's exactly where it begins. I don't tell this story because I want sympathy. I tell it because I know there are people listening who are still stuck in the waiting room of their own lives. Still checking their phones. Still explaining away silence. Still telling themselves tomorrow will be different. I used to live there, too. I used to believe love meant endurance. That being a good father meant absorbing pain quietly. That if I just stayed available, stayed kind, stayed open, eventually they'd come back. What no one tells you is that availability without respect slowly turns into self-erasure. You disappear inch by inch. First your voice. Then your expectations. Then your sense of worth. Until one day, you're still breathing, still showing up, but no one really sees you anymore, not even yourself. Leaving didn't make me brave. Staying had made me small. The morning I truly understood that, I was sitting on the pier watching a fisherman untangle his net. He worked patiently, humming under his breath, not angry at the knots, not rushing them either. Just steady. Intentional. I realized that's what my life had become. Untangling. Not rushing to fix what was broken. Just carefully choosing what was still worth holding. Some relationships are like knots you can loosen with time and care. Others tighten the more you pull. Knowing the difference is wisdom. I never became someone else when I changed my name. I became myself again, the version that existed before I learned to apologize for needing love. I learned to sit with loneliness without turning it into desperation. I learned that peace doesn't need witnesses. I learned that chosen family can feel safer than blood ties built on obligation. And most importantly, I learned that walking away isn't always rejection. Sometimes it's self-rescue. People still ask me if I regret it. If I regret not fighting harder. Not forcing reconciliation. Not reopening the door when the apology came. I tell them the truth. I regret the years I spent shrinking. I regret the nights I convinced myself silence was temporary when it was intentional. I regret teaching my children that I would accept anything just to stay connected. But leaving? No. I don't regret that. Because the man who stayed would have died quietly inside, still waiting. The man who left learned how to live again. If my children ever truly understand that, not just intellectually, but in their bones, I hope it brings them growth. Not guilt. Growth. And if they never do, that's not something I carry anymore. I carry my mornings. My walks. My coffee by the water. The sound of waves that don't ask anything of me except to listen. I carry the knowledge that my worth was never dependent on being remembered. If you're hearing this and something inside you aches, I want you to know this. You are allowed to stop explaining yourself to people who refuse to listen. You are allowed to stop proving your love to people who only notice it when it's convenient. You are allowed to leave the room where you're treated like furniture. You don't have to change your name. You don't have to move across the country. But you do have to choose yourself at least once. Because no one else will do it for you. And when you finally do, when you stop waiting, stop begging, stop shrinking, you may discover what I did. That peace doesn't come from being invited back. It comes from no longer needing the invitation. There's one last thing I need to say, and it's the part people rarely talk about when stories like mine are shared. Walking away didn't erase the love I had for my children. It didn't turn my memories cold. It didn't make me stop caring. Love doesn't switch off like a light. What changed was where that love lived. It stopped living in sacrifice. It stopped living in waiting. It stopped living in hope that hurt more than it healed. It became quiet. Private. Contained. I still wish Melissa well when her birthday comes around. I don't mark the date on a calendar anymore, but some things stay with you. I still think about Ryan when I hear about his old football team on the radio. I still wonder, sometimes, what kind of adults my grandchildren are becoming. But I wonder without pain now. Wonder without expectation. That's the difference. There's a strange relief that comes when you finally accept that not every story gets a reunion scene. Not every broken relationship ends with hugs and forgiveness and soft music playing in the background. Some stories end with distance. And distance, when chosen intentionally, can be merciful. I've learned that closure isn't something other people give you. It's something you build yourself, brick by brick, day by day, by refusing to reopen wounds that never healed the first time. I built mine slowly. With routine. With honesty. With silence that no longer scared me. There are mornings when I sit on my balcony, coffee cooling in my hands, watching fog lift off the water, and I think about how close I came to losing myself completely. 7 years is a long time to wait for someone to remember you. Long enough to forget yourself. I didn't reclaim my life all at once. I reclaimed it in pieces. A morning without checking my phone. A laugh that surprised me. A day that passed without grief sitting in the passenger seat. And then one day, I realized something simple and profound. I was okay. Not because everything turned out the way I once hoped, but because I stopped tying my survival to someone else's behavior. That's the part people don't like to hear. We want villains and heroes. We want apologies and reunions. We want the ending where everyone learns and changes. But real life doesn't always offer that. Sometimes the victory is quiet. Sometimes the victory is waking up without heaviness. Sometimes it's realizing you no longer flinch when the phone rings. Sometimes it's understanding that your heart finally belongs to you again. I don't know what my children tell themselves about me now. Maybe they say I abandoned them. Maybe they say I was stubborn. Maybe they've rewritten the story in a way that lets them sleep at night. That's their story to tell. This one is mine. And mine ends here, in a place where I am not invisible. Where my presence is not tolerated, but welcomed. Where I am not a backup plan or a financial option or a role to be activated when convenient. I am simply a man who learned, late, but honestly, that dignity is not something you ask for. It's something you protect. If you're still listening, still holding your breath for someone who hasn't shown up in years, let me leave you with this. Waiting doesn't make you loyal. Enduring neglect doesn't make you loving. And walking away doesn't make you heartless. Sometimes, it makes you free. And freedom, when it finally arrives, is quieter than pain, but it lasts much longer. This is where my story truly ends, not with applause, not with reconciliation, not with a dramatic return. It ends with something far rarer. Contentment. I wake up now without dread. Without that hollow pause where I used to brace myself for disappointment. My mornings belong to me. My time belongs to me. My name, this life, belongs to me. I didn't win anything back. I didn't reclaim what was lost. I chose something else instead. I chose not to spend the rest of my life explaining my worth to people who decided long ago they didn't want to see it. That choice didn't make me lonely. It made me whole. If my children ever watch this someday, if these words somehow find their way to them, I hope they don't hear bitterness. I hope they hear truth. I hope they understand that love without respect becomes a wound, not a bond. And if they never hear it, that's okay too. This story was never meant to change them. It was meant to save me. To anyone listening who feels forgotten, pushed aside, or only remembered when it's convenient, please hear this clearly. You are not difficult for wanting to matter. You are not selfish for protecting your peace. You are not wrong for walking away from a place where your presence is optional. You don't need to disappear the way I did. But you do need to stop disappearing inside yourself. Choose dignity. Choose peace. Choose the life that doesn't require you to beg for love. Because when you finally stop waiting for people who already left, you make room for a life that's been waiting for you all along. Thank you for listening to my story.